Welcome to the Community Warehouse. This is Imran Nanlawala, and we got a very exciting topic to discuss today. On episode 14, we're going to be discussing children's mental health matters. And today we have with us Sister Najwa Awad, who is a psychotherapist, certified perinatal mental health specialist, and organizational mental health consultant that has provided services to individuals and families in the Baltimore, Washington metropolitan area for over 15 years. She has obtained a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in social work, specializing in the clinical treatment of individuals and families. She also has a postgraduate certification in advanced trauma treatment and is an EMDR provider. So, without further ado, I'd like to bring on our guest, Sister Najwa. Sister Najwa, assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikum salam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
So, thank you again for having time to discuss this obviously very important topic, and with the trends that we've been noticing in our Western society with our youth. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss. So I had something written up that I want to read, which will kind of lead us into our first question. But so as our society evolves and advances, so do the challenges our youth face. Today's generation is growing up in a world vastly different from those of previous generations. With the proliferation of technology, the increased pace of life, and the numerous societal pressures, our young people are navigating a landscape that can often feel overwhelming. So the first question is, what is children's mental health, and why is it something that we should discuss?
Well, Jazakumullah khair for having me. It's really nice to be here, and it's such an important topic um, because I think it does get overlooked. So, mental health has become increasingly, popular, but there really is a big difference between regular mental health and children's mental health, and we can even see that in our expectations, parental expectations day to day, where we are treating children like they are adults. We're expecting them to regulate themselves like they're adults. We're expecting them to not have any bad days and for them to know what they're doing at all times. But when we are looking at the stages of development, um, Eric Erickson's theory about development is actually very helpful. So, starting from birth, we have these stages that we have to go through in order to be our best selves and navigate the world in the best way. And so the stages of development for children are much different than they are for adults. So for adults, while we are going through, might have some internal conflict about our identity, our relationships with other people, our purpose in life. Children are navigating very basic things like trust. Can I trust the people in my life? Can I trust the world? Is the world a good place? They also have a stage with mastery, where their self-esteem is building up. Do I have mastery over my environment in school? Am I a good student? Or do I learn that no matter what I do, I'm a failure at home or at school? So the stages are completely different. And so for us, parents and adults and teachers, it's good for us to be aware of some of these stages so we can help children while they're going through it. It's much easier to work with children who are developing than, working with adults later on who have lived their lives for a long time with these unresolved issues.
So right now, working with children and seeing some of the youth and the teenagers, what are some of the challenges that you are seeing with the students right now, or what are you seeing in these last year or two that are becoming very prominent, especially in our Muslim community?
It's really interesting because I think collectively we've all come out of a really huge thing, the pandemic. And subhanAllah, like I remember going through it, everybody was just so besides themselves. And now that we're out of it, I don't know that people have really reflected on what we've been through and the impact that's going to happen over the next several years or even decades. And we know that when you're exposed to adverse experiences as a child, it has a much more profound effect. So, just a couple years ago, they had we all had a hard time, but specifically children, you know, it was a year or so of isolation, right? And you can imagine how this would be for children with healthy families, but how impactful was that for children who have families who are not very healthy? Um, and the role of socialization is so important for kids. So we had this whole year where really everything was online. And that's not even the preferred way of learning for kids, right? So they're kind of cut off from their peers to a certain extent. Their education now is completely turned, everything has been turned upside down. And so, um, I think there's been a big shift for children and adults. Like now everything is online, way more than before. I mean, I don't know about you, but like I'm doing telehealth. I used to do a little bit, but now it's like 100%. And so I don't know that children have completely come out of that outside of school, where there is this really big pull more than ever, I think, to be online and engage in space. But there's a lot of dangers with that. There's a lot of dangers with social media and being in chat boxes and just even being exposed to ideas. Back when we were growing up, like we were limited in what we were exposed to. There was school and there was home. But now there's so many ideologies that might not even be congruent with Islam and our family values that children are exposed to. So on the one hand, they can be very isolated because if they're spending all the time on video games and social media, so they're not engaging in real life. But on the other hand, they are part of this really big portal, this really big online world that's drawing them in, that we have to watch and make sure that they're not pulled in wrong directions that's going to affect their spiritual health and their mental health.
Could you go into more specifics in terms of some of the current challenges that we see the youth facing and how that's specifically affecting their mental well-being?
Post-pandemic, there's increased anxiety and depression. It was already there. It was already on the rise, but now we have that even more. I think specific for both boys and girls, but for girls, I think there's been even more unrealistic expectations for how they look, how they're expected to look, and fashion and that kind of thing. Because if you are spending so much time on Instagram and all these people look a certain way, which is not really realistic, I mean, the hours of makeup and just crazy things that they do, then these girls grow up like, well, I have these flaws, or there's these things wrong with me, and they feel inherently like there's something wrong with them because, again, it's not real life. So there's been more self-esteem issues with that. You have also, like I said, like the ideology, like the social political climate that's emerging, where adolescents have always had identity issues, but now there are more issues in terms of gender, a sexual orientation, all those things. There's also confusion about like the role of spirituality. Maybe your family is very practicing, but you fall into a friend group that's not very practicing. There's always been substance abuse. That's always been a thing. And now vaping. So that's always evolving. So it's everything that's been there is still there, but then you have newer stuff with social media as well.
Well, what are some tips or suggestions for parents? Like, when this is happening and they might be seeing this, or, so what are the signs? What are some suggestions that they could do if they do feel something that their child might be affected?
Yeah. So I'll take that into two questions. You can start to tell that something is wrong when their baseline is off, meaning everybody has a certain way that they carry themselves. If you notice a shift with sleep, meaning that they're going to sleep at 1 o'clock in the morning, or they're just sleeping all of the time, right? That is a sign that something is not right. Eating patterns, especially restrictive eating for girls, but it can also be, a sign of depression if someone is eating too much or too little. Isolation and withdrawal. Now, naturally, during adolescence, they pull away a little bit to find out, their identity and their role in the world. But it shouldn't be so much that they're spending all their time in their room with the door closed. It shouldn't be that, no, I don't want to go to the masjid on the weekend with you anymore, or that they're so embarrassed they don't want to go to family functions anymore. It shouldn't be to that degree. So anytime you notice a big shift in personality, you want to explore that and see what's going on. Unfortunately, like, we live in such a busy world that sometimes parents are so caught up in their day-to-day things that they wait until it's too late. And so you don't want to be in that situation where you're bringing your child to therapy, or you're starting to want to have a relationship with them after you've noticed that they are very anxious or that they're in a depressive episode. It's going to be much, much harder. And honestly, the child is going to be more suspicious and less likely to engage, because they're like, where have you been this whole time? Now you want to come? Um, and so the biggest thing you could do is prevention, and always keeping, the lines of communication open, and spending good quality time. I think in like previous generations, it's relationships were more transactional. Parents engaged with children when they needed something, like I need to, and this really did not have a very good impact on the relationship, right? So it's only when things are not going well that the parents engage. This has changed over time, alhamdulillah, but what we want to do is we want to spend quality time, so making consistent efforts for family time. So it could be like a Friday routine, for example. Every Friday, and this is something that we've incorporated in my family, where we do my husband does a short lesson, Islamic lesson, and then we do movie night. So they have, they're getting that family time, they're getting that Islamic, education time, and then we're doing something fun together. So you want to be doing these things before, because your child is much more likely going to be resilient if you've invested all this time in before, and also the relationship is stronger. Because during these family times, you have the opportunity to bring up things that are wrong. During dinner time, which, I mean, the research backs it up, that dinner time where the whole family comes together is very important, because you're checking in on your day. You're opening those lines of communication. So all of that prevention work goes a long way. And, sometimes I hear like from parents of teenagers, well, my teenager doesn't talk to me. Do you talk to your teenager? Meaning, like, it doesn't always have to be like, how was your day? How are your friends? It could be in the car saying, oh, you would never believe what happened to me at work today. Or, I read something today online and it made me think of you. And these are all the reasons why. So just human beings, we naturally mirror each other. If the kid is not talking, then you talk. And even if they look annoyed with you, continue to talk, because you're keeping that relationship going, and then you're keeping communication going.
So you gave some good examples of what parents can do: talk to their kids, have dinner with their kids. You gave the example of your own family. So let's say parents start noticing some signs. So it's not prevention at this point, but you start noticing some signs of anxiety, some depression, and it might not be at the level of seeking professional help. What are some other ways that parents can support the mental health component of their children?
So, in those kinds of situations, you want to, pick a good time, and then have a kind of a chat with your child. Sometimes, just like, how we pick all the wrong times, right? Like, so their child is not doing their homework, and it's like, you never do your homework anymore. And you know what? I've noticed that you're sleeping too much, and you're doing this, and that's not going to be the right time. So you want to pick a good time and sit with your child by themselves, because in front of their siblings, that's embarrassing. I mean, they're not going to open up. And just say, I've noticed some differences. I've noticed that, you seem like a little withdrawn. You haven't really asked to spend time with your friends. And, like, I noticed your appetite, like I made your favorite food last night and you didn't even touch it. What's going on? So asking lots of open-ended questions, not so much telling them. And they might, I mean, now these days, kids are very mental health savvy. So they might be like, you know what? I think I've actually been anxious, or I feel like I might be depressed. And so you start to, gather information and help them process through it. When did you first notice this? Oh, you've been anxious lately? What are some things that you've tried? And they might say, well, I haven't tried anything. Okay. Well, if you find that you're always anxious before tests, maybe we can do something about that. Maybe the night before we can study. Or, I can teach you a dua or two to use when you're feeling nervous, or to ask, Allah to help you. So those kinds of things, as a parent myself, I've really underestimated how, I underestimated how much we are teachers. Like, there is such a big teaching component with children. And it sounds like, well, yeah, doesn't everybody know that? I don't think so. I think we assume that our schools teach kids a lot of things. I think we assume that our kids know these things already. But sometimes it's as simple as like, sometimes when I get anxious, I notice that my breathing is off. And so this is how I practice deep breathing. And maybe this is something that you can try the next time you're anxious before a test. That goes such a long way because you're modeling, you're showing that it's something that you have experienced, something that you can practice together. And so subhanAllah, I mean, there's so many little things like that can make such a huge difference for that child. If someone just sits down and spends that time with them, and then following up. So maybe in a week or so, like last week, I really enjoyed our talk together. And I noticed, like, have things gotten better? What things have you tried? And then you're kind of keeping a tab on it. So if things have gotten better, alhamdulillah, that's fantastic. If not, you're like, okay, well, maybe we could try these things. And if not, we can see if we can find some help through your school or whatever.
For some of the audience who might be teachers, I myself are in the field of education, are educators. What would be some signs or tips for them to realize that maybe this child, that this student that they're working with every day, maybe is going through some struggles? What would be some tips for some of us educators to kind of keep an eye in the classroom?
Yeah. And when you think about it, sometimes educators spend more time with their kids than parents. So they'll be some of the first to see that difference in baseline. If you had a really good student and now all of a sudden they're not, or you had someone who was always very active and now they're kind of quiet, or the other way around. One thing that you could do is, depending on the age, but you can kind of sit and talk with the child. Oh, I've noticed like things have been different. Is everything okay? Like, is there anything I can help support you with? And they might be like, oh, my grandmother passed away, and then you can extend, support to the child, to the family. Or it might be like, I've the material is harder, so like I haven't been as focused. So checking in with the child definitely helps. I think another thing that really helps is knowing that children do the best that they can. Right? Like assuming that the Islamic of assuming good in others, I think specifically for children too, is that they generally do the best they can with what they have. And so, avoiding labeling someone misbehaving versus like, what is it that this child needs in this moment or might be lacking one way or another that we can help and bolster them up. So it could be reaching out to the parents and like, I've noticed this child is more distracted. Any changes at home that would be good for me to know about. And it's, working with the child, with the family to come up with like creative solutions versus assuming that it's something necessarily about, this she always daydreams, but probably she's doing the best with what she has. It's just she has other things going on as well too. And early intervention helps. Some kids will have some issues that need to be addressed. Coming up with creative solutions, like having someone who's more active maybe come to the front of the class. Someone who's more sad, if there's a guidance counselor or a counselor that the school has, I've noticed this person has been kind of sad lately, and helping them utilize that resource. But I think more so than anything else, just coming from a place of curiosity. And I know it's hard for teachers because you guys have so much going on. I mean, the amount of work that you guys do on a daily basis is just amazing. And so finding the time to be able to identify these students and to help them in this way, I mean, may Allah reward you guys. But just coming from a place of curiosity will do wonders, inshallah.
And in terms of like programming, is there anything that the school can be doing from a programmatic side in terms of creating certain programs, and how more efficiently can they work with the parents? Like, so how do we work together with the different stakeholders to just prevent and work on programming that can address these issues before they even become larger than they are?
So, a lot of Islamic schools, they're limited in their funding. But, I worked at one school and my kids are in an Islamic school. Something I've noticed in both of those settings, having just a part-time counselor makes a big difference. The counselor can do, occasional workshops where they're connecting with parents, giving them basic tips. And so there's that one aspect. So like the education piece and connecting with parents and showing them support in that way. And then there's the one-on-one time with the students. So the schools have different ways of doing this, but one would be like a box in a classroom. And so if any child has a concern, there's like a slip of paper, I need help with this. And they kind of just put it in, and then periodically the teacher or the counselor can look at it and then kind of pull the child and talk to them for 15, 20 minutes, see what's going on, how can we better support this child. One school that I was at, it was a nice setup in that they had a general counselor part-time, and then I was kind of a therapist. So if it was even a persistent issue, I would do the counseling, whereas if it was just a general day-to-day issue, the school counselor would handle. And we found a way that it would work within their budget, alhamdulillah. But just having a contact person, and if the school can't even afford to do that, it might be someone who just has a background in mental health, doing an occasional workshop here or there, and also just having like a resource. It could be on the school's website, or sometimes they have like directories of all the phone numbers. It could be like a page in the directory, so that students, not students, but parents, should they need resources, will have like this sheet that's already made out, and it makes it convenient for school admin too. Like, these are resources that we've connected with. They know that they're willing to help any of our students. Feel free to reach out to them. That also makes it easy and streamlined, I think, for everybody involved.
So do you just have, as this is great for all the educators, I think it's very important for them and the communities to find the resources. Is there any just general resources that you kind of maybe have seen at least could help out, at least they could guide them places? I know there's like Family Youth Institute, Khalil Center, Bridges. So I thought maybe it's just from or some even books or certain things that might be great for them to at least people to want to maybe know more or learn more or find someone to help get them support. Thought if you could give some suggestions there.
Yes, I think we have a handout, inshallah, that you guys might be posting out with a bunch of resources for Islamic mental health tools and places. I am a big fan of the the FYI, Family Youth Institute. They have so many different like educational things. And I do believe they also come out to schools and give talks. Khalil Center also, something I love about their organization is they also have like Islamic consultations as well. But inshallah, I think that we have a resource ready, and just those two on their own are good. I don't know of any specific educational Muslim educational ones. I know Yaqeen Institute, which I'm a fellow, they do have a curriculum team. So it's like a not just psycho-spiritual, but I think it's all aspects of Islam. They have a curriculum development team that teachers can use directly in their classrooms in working with students on just Islamic issues, but also tougher issues related to mental health as well.
And we'll be posting, we're going to be posting that handout. I think it's for anybody who's watching on Facebook and YouTube. Just go to the comment section. We're going to pin it as a primary comment, and you'll be able to access. It's a very beneficial handout. Sister Najwa, the last question I had was, so you mentioned some of these great examples of what our Islamic schools could do. So just generally speaking, in our community, what are some of the positive things that you've noticed over the, maybe let's say last 5 to 10 years that you've seen our community leaders, community activists, whether they be different departments within our communities, do to address some of these issues that we've discussed today?
There has been a huge, there's a huge difference between when I first started practicing about 15 years ago, or even a little bit more than that, versus now. I mean, I think there's been so much mental health awareness that now it's not as stigmatized as it was before. There's a lot more interdisciplinary collaboration. Something that I enjoy is working with not just schools, but with imams as well. Because I think traditionally speaking, a lot of times when there were problems in the community members would go straight to the imam. And I've talked with very good imams, and they'll tell me, like, this is not something that I went to school for. And so being able to collaborate with them, again, whether it's through like workshops with the masjid, so that it takes away the stigma of it, but then now we're also kind of connecting two things, spirituality and mental health, which go hand in hand. But we're saying, hey, it's okay, and here's a resource that we can that we can use. And then post-pandemic, I think when the pandemic hit, like the floodgates came open, and now everybody wants to go to therapy. So that has been a really good thing. My hope over the next 5-10 years or in the future is for us to continue to increasingly bridge the gap between mental health and spiritual practices, Islam, because they're not disconnected. But for the longest time, because there was a lot of Muslims were not seeking mental health therapy. It was just a very secular way of counseling and therapy. But now, with the rise of Muslim mental health therapists, and there is, I mean, like, so many students reach out to me, like whether it's for practicums or whatever. Like, inshallah, there is definitely a rise of Muslim therapists. So that's going to be very, very good. That we can continue to work on these, modern day times of operational definitions of Islamic psychology. Like when we have Islamic, what is that going to look like, and what are the ways that we can continue to promote Islamic mental health in our communities?
Thank you so much. And is there a website if somebody wanted to maybe attend a session with you, or maybe get a consultation? Is that something that you offer?
Yeah, so I do have a website. It's amanacounseling.com. And then I'm on Instagram, so at Therapy with Najwa. You can find almost everything there. A link to my website, and I have some videos and things like that. But that would be a great way to connect with me, inshallah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. May the Most High reward you, and again, very beneficial session today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and giving me the opportunity.
My pleasure. Okay. Wa assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sorry, I was stuck at a place, so I had to stop the car.
Oh, that's okay.
There. So, thumbs up.
Okay.
All right.
Are we still live?